Hello, I'm Christopher Albert, host of Junkie Jam Live, and we are shooting outside today because my Zoom app isn't working. But, much like my Zoom productions, I'm not wearing any pants. On today's special edition of Junkie Jam Live, I welcome my good friend, world-renowned, site-specific, multidisciplinary, and installation artist Abigail Deville to tell us all about her latest site-specific installation right here in Madison Square Park, New York City. Not only is she a native New Yorker, but after receiving her MFA from Yale University, she went on to exhibit her work all across the United States and Europe. Her work, often rooted in the themes of the history of racist violence, marginalization, and cultural invisibility, has even been written up by the New York Times and the Washington Post. Her latest, site-specific sculpture entitled Light of Freedom also highlights the lost regional history of the first blacks of New York. While most of us contributed nothing but t-shirts and blank social media posts, the ongoing Black Lives Matter movement inspired her to create this masterpiece. And she's here to tell us all about her site-specific installation because I can't read any of this. This is a very special edition of Junkie Jam Live.
My name is Abigail Deville, and when I was born, my parents thought I was going to be a boy, but I think that was very common, back in the day, not knowing what you gonna get. So my name was Seth, and then I had no name for some days, and somebody gave my dad a name book, and that's where he got Abigail from. Really uninteresting story. But I could have been Seth. Hey, y'all. I make sculptures and site-specific installations mainly, but I also do painting, costume, and set design, and so I'm overall multidisciplinary artist. So I'm standing in front of my sculpture called Light of Freedom, and it was commissioned by Madison Square Park Conservancy, called me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a project in the park, and I said, yes. I started thinking about, what potentially could respond to the moment that we were in, thinking about June 2020 and the racial reckoning that was going on with all of the protests around George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And they gave me some history books on the history here of Madison Square Park, and it turned out that in 1876, from 1876 to 1882, the Statue of Liberty's hand and torch was here installed in the park, not very far from where I'm standing right now. And it was in an effort to fundraise for the Statue of Liberty. It was the only part that was fully completed, and it was sent ahead of the rest of the statue as a goodwill mission and fundraising opportunity, and to generate interest within the American public to put forth the money for the completion of the statue. The Statue of Liberty with the hand and torch, the image of that, this encapsulates everything, like centuries old struggle here in this nation, and thinking about the people who are always left at the margins and who are always struggling for equality and for equal rights under the law. The Declaration of Independence / the Constitution says that is afforded to each American citizen. So thinking about that, I was thinking about actually removing the hand, and thinking how the hand could potentially represent this idea of big government, but that it's actually the individuals that propel democracy. It's individuals that push forward these ideals that have never been realized from generation to generation, and thinking about the potential of that charge that's passed like a torch from subsequent generations, how it took 75 years of pushing and prodding and protest before the civil rights movement happened. It's just not something that just was like a flash in the pan of all of a sudden. It was consistent and constant activism and protest that led up to that moment, or even going back further and thinking about abolition, right? And thinking about how many decades of constant, opposition in the dissolution of slavery here in this nation, how long that took. So these are long, drawn out struggles that happened over centuries, and thinking about the unfulfilled and the uncompleted work, which is, part of the promise of America. The symbolism that is layered within the statue or in the sculpture. There's a scaffolding that's on the outside that's painted gold, and the reason of that is thinking about the continual labor, or the way that labor is fetishized in this nation. And when it comes to ideas of immigration, or what potentially immigrants contribute to society, is, we always, or this nation always wants labor, the labor of the immigrant, but not actually the body of the immigrant, or how they shift and change and contribute to American society. And so thinking about also the unfulfilled and the continued work that needs to happen around these rusty ideas of democracy, right? So thinking about, okay, democracy is something that was taken from the Greeks, right? So it was already centuries old. It was an ancient idea in the first place, and how it was revisioned for America. So that's pretty much why the torch has this rusty patina on it. And then the bell on the inside, which I learned afterwards, because I was super hyped on having a bell in there and thinking about making a relationship to the Liberty Bell. But actually the bell was a symbol of the abolitionist struggle in the 19th century. And also it's an old school bell that came from a small town in Illinois, and thinking about also the problems of education in this country. Freedom is fought for and rings out, and voices, right? So making a connection between the silence of the bell and the silencing of voices. And then the mannequin arms that are inside the flame are blue, because blue is the hottest fire. And I was also thinking about the ways in which people came here were, historically water transport, right? And those are people who came here of their own volition, and those who came involuntarily through the transatlantic slave trade. The planks are there just, also to suggest this unfulfilled or unfinished work, and thinking about the casualness and the, almost obligation of all of us to participate within that.